ค่ะก็มี handout นะคะที่เป็นบล็อกอยู่2 เรื่องนะคะเรื่องแรกก็ Thailand's worst flooding in 50 years นะคะแล้วก็เรื่องที่2ก็ How did we deal with the floods in the old days นะคะก็ทั้ง2เรื่องนี้จะลองอ่านสัก2 paragraph แรกนะคะแล้วก็ลองดูซิว่าก็เหมือนเดิมค่ะว่าผู้เขียนเนี่ยใช้การใช้ภาษาของเขาเนี่ยอย่างไรนะถึงทำให้ดูความคิดเห็นเนี่ยน่าติดตามนะคะแล้วก็ท่านอาจารย์จะเห็นด้วยหรือไม่เห็นด้วยยังไงนะคะค่ะใช้วิธีไหนเทคนิคไหนในการเขียนค่ะ
Chat with your partners. So let's hear some talking. Right, so we're going to start with our participants in Bangkok and then go back to Hua Hin. What are your thoughts about these 2 articles? You can speak about one of them or both of them. I don't mind. What do you think makes the perspective strong or powerful? What makes it, how could it be improved? Any thoughts on either or both article from Bangkok? Would you like to share? Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. The first one from of Vic Rolling, I think is the worst situation. But lucky for me, I have 3 houses and my school, no flooding at all.
Yeah.
So, together with Big Rolling, that we have to care about this and plan to be careful in the future in this block. But the other one from David Lemon block, in the old day we have a flood like this maybe in 1995, and our king have remarked for this to plan to beware of this, but no one cared about this. No one do it at all.
Yeah.
It's my opinion.
Yeah.
It's different because this is the first one is the general. Every author liked about this, but the first, from the old day, many don't care about this at all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. That's more of a commentary, really, your own reaction to the 2 articles. But it's interesting what you pointed out from my perspective is that lots of people are talking about being careful, take care, how do we survive right now? It was the conversation that everybody was having. So in a sense, what this first person is writing about is not an unusual opinion. It was kind of what you saw all over in the news. And his final line, let's be careful out there, which is what everybody was sharing. You point out that the other article is kind of an unusual perspective because people are not so much talking about His Majesty's recommendations at that time. And perhaps people didn't take them very seriously or didn't know what to do. So this reflection on the olden days is kind of an unusual perspective to take in a blog. And interestingly enough, you can only reflect on the olden days if you were there. I mean, I suppose you could do research, but it really becomes a very individual kind of perspective from somebody who was here at that time. How about from Hua Hin? What did you notice about the two articles? Anything you'd like to share?
Ajahn Madi, yes,
Hello.
I read the Thailand's worst flooding in 50 years. The writer used the word strong phrases, like Bangkok is surrounded. Yes, but surrounded by politicians. But the topic say that Thailand's worst flooding. So the reader may think about Bangkok is surrounded with water, but exactly surrounded by politicians. Yes, the writer used the strong phrase and used the word I'm lucky. I have somewhere to go, and like a million or so Bangkok residents have the means to do it. Many millions more do not. Yes, I feel sorry for them, so they use the phrase to compare lucky and unlucky. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. Yes, again, this is a nice, thorough kind of analysis of the choice of language by this author, this blogger, and pointing out, contrasting. Here is what happened for some people, not for me. I feel sorry for the ones it happened to. So this is, again, an example of when you write an opinion piece like this, you're able to put in those very personal statements, like, I feel sorry for the others, which if you were writing a straight news article, you would not include that personal perspective. So one of the interesting things about writing about personal opinion is it's your chance and your students' chances to say something that is true for them. And if we look back to our title, Unlocking Learners' Voices, that's the point. If one of your learners feels very sorry that his neighbor or his cousin had their house flooded, but he did not, this provides this opportunity to express these things that are important. So before we go on, let me do a little summary of the 3 articles we read about flooding so far. 1 in Vermont, 2 in Thailand, and Ajahn Naraporn will provide a little translation of the summary as well. So what makes these articles strong? We saw things in the first one about the repetition of a phrase. We were lucky. So in between talking about we were lucky, she talked about all the things that happened, things that she saw, sights. If you read the entire article when you have some time, maybe later today, you'll find there's lots of powerful imagery. She talks about the color of the water, which is a very striking image. She talks about, I think, about the water looking angry, which water really can look angry when it's moving quickly. So she gets us to think about these images, and then she counteracts them with a personal opinion. We were lucky. I feel, even though we went through this difficult time, we were lucky. Again, as our Ajahn here expressed, feeling lucky at having more than one house and a school that stayed dry. That's kind of a miracle. In the other 2 articles, we again have the perspective of using of strong language, saying something very simply, I feel sorry for them, I felt sad, So choosing words that convey a feeling, not just a statement of, I saw this and this is what it looks like. This is the kind of writing where you get to talk about how something feels. And then in the final article, we have the perspective of somebody who can look back over time. And while he is perhaps a little bit critical in his statement, he's not harshly critical. He's just saying, in the olden days, we just waded through the water. It wasn't diverted. My family didn't want to live on Sukhumvit because the roads are too muddy when it rains, so we stayed in this other part of the city. I mean, just interesting perspective, and he makes us feel sympathetic to the olden days just by describing what they are. All right, I'll let you do your little summary, please, Ajahn Naraporn.
Thank you อาจารย์มาจีค่ะอาจารย์ให้ดูตัวอย่างนะคะประมาณ4ตัวอย่างนะคะจากบทความนะคะทั้งจากหนังสือพิมพ์นะคะการแสดงความคิดเห็นของผู้อ่านนะคะแล้วก็จากบล็อกนะคะทีนี้อาจารย์จากกิจกรรมทั้งหมดเนี่ยอาจารย์ก็บอกว่าให้เราลองดูซิว่าทั้งหมดที่เราอ่านเนี่ยนะคะทั้ง4ชิ้นเนี่ยมีส่วนไหนวิธีการใช้ภาษานะคะที่ทำให้เราอ่านแล้วเรามีความรู้สึกคล้อยตามนะคะมีความรู้สึกอาจจะเห็นด้วยนะคะหรือแม้แต่ไม่เห็นด้วยก็ตามนะคะลักษณะการใช้ภาษานี้ใช้อย่างไรนะคะอย่างแรกก็คือการที่ผู้เขียนเนี่ยนะคะใช้ประโยคนะคะหรือคำซ้ำๆนะคะอย่างเช่นในบทความแรกนะคะที่เขียนว่าที่ผู้เขียนบอกว่า we were lucky นะคะเขาเขียนหลายครั้งมากนะคะจากประสบการณ์ของเขาที่เจอเฮอริเคนนะคะเขาก็เขียนซ้ำนะคะว่า we were lucky นะคะซึ่งตรงนั้นเนี่ยก็เป็นการย้ำเป็นการสื่อนะคะความรู้สึกอารมณ์ของผู้เขียนนะคะให้เรารู้สึกคล้อยตามอีกวิธีหนึ่งก็คือใช้คำที่แรงๆนะคะ use of strong language นะคะซึ่งอันนี้เนี่ยก็อาจจะเป็นคำที่ใช้บรรยายอย่างเช่นในเรื่องน้ำท่วมนะคะลักษณะสีของน้ำนะคะหรือว่าความเสียหายที่เกิดขึ้นนะคะใช้คำที่ค่อนข้างจะแรงนะคะและอีกอันนึงคือใช้คำที่แสดงความรู้สึกนะคะที่สื่อความรู้สึกออกมานะคะที่อย่างเช่นบอกว่า I feel sorry นะคะหรือว่าที่บอกว่าอยากรู้สึกแม้แต่รู้สึกดีใจรู้สึกว่าตัวเองโชคดีอะไรนั้นก็ตามนะคะคือสื่ออารมณ์ออกมาให้เห็นชัดๆนะคะอีกวิธีหนึ่งนะคะที่เห็นจากตัวอย่างทั้ง4อันก็คือที่อาจารย์มาจีบอกว่าผู้เขียนเนี่ย critical นิดๆนะคะคือว่ามีการวิพากษ์วิจารณ์แต่ก็ไม่รุนแรงมากนะคะแต่ว่าสื่อให้เห็นนะคะโดยการมีคำวิพากษ์วิจารณ์นะคะอย่างเช่นบอกว่าเมื่อก่อนเนี่ยน้ำท่วมก็ไม่เห็นจะมีอะไรเลยนะคะก็ไม่เหมือนกับสมัยนี้นะคะที่ทุกคนก็จะรู้สึกอาจจะตื่นตระหนกนะคะแล้วก็มีความรู้สึกว่ากลัวหรือว่ารอว่าเมื่อไหร่น้ำจะมาหรือน้ำมาแล้วเนี่ยก็มีความรู้สึกไม่ดีเลยนะคะจนทุกวันนี้คนก็ยังมีความรู้สึกที่ไม่ดีอยู่นะคะอย่างนั้นเป็นต้นอันนั้นก็จะเป็นคร่าวๆนะคะเพราะฉะนั้นการเลือกใช้คำเนี่ยสำคัญมากนะคะในการที่จะทำให้สิ่งที่เราเขียนเนี่ย strong อีกอันนึงที่เกิดขึ้นคือ use of facts นะคะการใช้ข้อเท็จจริงใช่ไหมคะนำมาเป็นสถิติหรือเป็นเหตุการณ์นะคะตัวเลขอะไรอย่างเงี้ยนะคะมาย้ำให้ข้อความของเราเนี่ยน่าคล้อยตามนะคะผู้อ่านมีความรู้สึกมีความเห็นร่วมแล้วก็การจบด้วย conclusion ending with conclusion ซึ่งอาจารย์มาที่ได้พูดถึงแต่แรกนะคะก็เป็นการย้ำนะคะสิ่งที่เขียนมาทั้งหมดแล้วก็ย้ำอีกทีหนึ่งค่ะ
Okay, thank you so much. Now we're going to work together to generate some kind of a letter. You're not going to finish it. You're just going to be thinking about writing it. And what I would like to suggest, I can't exactly see the grouping in the other sites, but in Bangkok, I would like you to be set up so that everybody has one partner. So if you move here and somebody moves up here, you're all sitting at a table with 2 people, okay? So that's the one logistic. Make sure you're in a group of 2. The next logistic is I'm going to erase the whiteboard and we're going to do some brainstorming, probably easier to do it here in Bangkok. And the idea is to think about the flooding, think about the ideas written in that blog, and let's just brainstorm what, if you were going to write a letter to the Bangkok Post. Now the flooding is over. Well, that flooding was over. Flooding is still going on in the south. What are some possible topics that you could write a letter to the editor of the Bangkok Post about, related to the flooding? So just call out or use the microphone. We'll maybe put up maybe 5 topics, and then you can pick one to work with your partner. I'm going to have you in the back come and sit up front so you have a partner here, okay? Okay, so what are some topics that you might write about? Where you might have an opinion. Well, I have one that I will put up already. One is, can we learn lessons? What are the lessons we can learn from the flooding around Bangkok? In other words, what did we learn? What's another topic that you might write an opinion about? This is brainstorming, so you can say anything. Please, go ahead. I know you have an idea.
How about food and water shortages?
Okay. Food and water shortages. And actually, as long as you mention that one, here's a subtopic which might be the topic of hoarding.
Okay.
Hoarding of food and water. What else?
I think how to survive in the horrible flooding.
Okay, so survival. Surviving terrible flooding. How about just one more topic? Anybody? Thank you for calling in wherever you were from. That was perfect.
How to live with your family.
Suddenly we find ourselves living with our families, and we might not be doing that all the time. So, okay. Okay, these are just some sample topics. There are many others that you might use. So here's what I'd like you to do. You're working with a partner. Everybody's got just one person. I think that gives everybody more chance to talk. Please, if you're more comfortable still brainstorming using Thai language, that's fine. But when we share, we'll switch to English so that I can understand. And we'll start with, where are we at? We'll start with Hua Hin and go to Chiang Mai for some ideas. So just chat with your partner. What is a topic that you can think you might write a letter to the Bangkok Post? And what's the opinion you want to express? That's all you have to do at this point. You're not going to write the letter. Just think about the topic and your opinion. Okay, go ahead and start chatting.
ค่ะสำหรับกิจกรรมนี้นะคะที่อาจารย์มาจี้ให้พวกเราช่วยกัน brainstorm topic นะคะที่เราคิดว่าอยากจะเขียนนะคะที่เกี่ยวกับน้ำท่วมที่เพิ่งผ่านมานะคะก็ได้มา4 topic ด้วยกันนะคะ topic แรกก็คือ lessons from the flooding นะคะเราได้บทเรียนอะไรจากน้ำท่วมครั้งนี้นะคะแล้วก็ topic ที่2ที่ได้รับการเสนอขึ้นมานะคะจากอาจารย์แอนดี้ที่หัวหินนะคะแล้วก็จากอาจารย์ที่กรุงเทพด้วยก็คือfood and water shortages นะคะซึ่งก็นำไปสู่การที่เราทำไมฮะกักตุนนะคะกักตุนของนะคะค่ะ hoarding นะคะแล้วก็หัวข้อที่3นะคะที่ได้มาก็คือsurviving terrible flooding นะคะค่ะว่าเราจะเอาตัวรอดยังไงจากน้ำท่วมที่เป็น เป็นมหันตภัยในคราวนี้นะคะแล้วก็หัวข้อที่4ก็คือ living with your family นะคะซึ่งอันนี้เนี่ยอาจารย์มาร์ตี้ก็บอกว่าใช่เพราะว่าในเหตุวิกฤตเนี่ยน้ำท่วมเนี่ยก็กลายเป็นว่าเราทำอะไรไม่ได้ไปไหนไม่ได้แล้วเราก็เลยอยู่กับครอบครัวของเรานะคะซึ่งในวันปกติอาจจะไม่ได้อยู่ต่างคนต่างมีหน้าที่ของตัวเองนะคะเพราะอาจารย์เลือกเลยค่ะจาก4หัวข้อนี้เลือกมา1หัวข้อนะคะdiscuss กันในกลุ่มนะคะว่าจะใช้หัวข้อไหนแล้วก็จากหัวข้อนั้นเนี่ยอาจารย์คิดว่าจะนำเสนอ opinion ความคิดเห็นอะไรนะคะสมมุติว่าเราจะเขียนนะคะความคิดเห็นไปลงที่Bangkok Postนะคะที่ Post Back นะคะคอลัมน์ Post Back ใน Bangkok Post นะคะค่ะ topic อะไรที่อาจารย์เลือก1ใน4แล้วเมื่อเลือกแล้วเนี่ยมี opinion อะไรมีความคิดเห็นอะไรเกี่ยวกับ topic นั้นที่อาจารย์อยากจะนำเสนอให้ผู้อ่านหนังสือพิมพ์ได้อ่านด้วยค่ะ
I'm going to go ahead and start right away back over in Hua Hin. I think that's what we're at now. And from you, I'd love to hear what is, what's the topic that you and your partner came up with? And what's your opinion that you might express if you're going to write a letter to the editor of the Bangkok Post about this topic? So anybody from Hua Hin, please.
And Andy, could you find anybody there to express their opinions?
We come up with the topic surviving to a terrible flooding with 3R. With 3R. The first one is ready. We have to be ready to deal with the flood. So we have to learn a lot, and we can learn from the lessons in the past. So we can get prepared all the time, and so we will go to the next R. The next R, if we cannot deal with the flood, we have to be ready to go to escape from the flood. And then, and then the last one, we just got the last one. And then when you're ready to escape from the flood, you must be relaxed. You must feel free, and all of us can deal with all the problems. That's it.
Okay, great. Thank you. What I want to point out, so this, you might consider this as just like an outline or a rough idea of what they want to write about. But here they have a strategy, which is to use the 3 R's to come up with something that's a little bit catchy. So maybe I read their letter in the editor later on, and I think, oh, I don't remember exactly, but what was it? It was 3 R's. Okay, it was ready. Oh yeah, then ready to go and relaxed. And that helps me to remember, and it makes me feel like they're very well organized in their thinking. Thanks a lot. How about an example from Chiang Mai? Is somebody ready in Chiang Mai?
Yes, we are.
Thank you.
Okay, from Chiang Mai, we think about the topic keeping a positive outlook. By our opinion is try to encourage or support each other while we get a terrible situation. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Thank you. Yeah, this would be a very powerful opinion piece to put out, because we know that it was very challenging. Even for people who were not flooded, it was challenging to keep a positive outlook, because there was the being afraid that maybe tomorrow or maybe next week you will be flooded, or perhaps family members are suffering. So the idea of how can we keep a positive outlook even when something is so challenging as this. Okay, great. So again, we're not going to exactly do this topic, but when you get to the time of working with your students to bring an example for Ajahn Shea to work with, you could use the example that you just generated with your partner, or you could provide opportunities for your students. So before we go on to look at planning for an essay, I just want to touch on a couple of things quickly. One is the use of language. If you look again on the internet, you can Google something just like this, language for persuasion adjectives. And one of the things that these articles and these websites will point out is that your writing, your students' writing, will be more powerful if they are using more interesting words. So here's just a list of adjectives. Perhaps these are all familiar to you. Vast, which means big. Rare, which means kind of unusual. Magnificent is certainly more powerful than great, right? Magnificent sounds bigger than great. Handsome, we know that all Thai men are handsome. Desolate means very lonely or alone or without things. Scrawny means kind of like small and shriveled and skinny, usually not used in a very positive way. Malicious is very mean. Again, malicious is stronger than mean. Tough is like to be very strong and firm and, kind of rough. So to think with your students about trying to come up with more interesting vocabulary which will make their writing stronger. Let's look at another set. Here are adverbs. Adverbs, oftentimes we use verbs, we have to in our writing. An adverb makes the verb stronger. So something happened briefly, short amount of time. Something happened regretfully. Regretfully, the floodwaters ran over my house. I feel sorry about it. Anxiously means to be nervous or upset. Cautiously is to do something carefully. Wrongly means it's something I should not have done. Patiently, we have to do things patiently during the flood times. Firmly, again, means strongly. So let's just brainstorm quickly with your partner some verbs. What are some strong verbs that you could use? So chat with your partner, and we'll put some up on the whiteboard. What are some strong verbs? So this is action or a state of being. What are some good ones for persuasion? Chat with your partner, and we'll take some examples from Bangkok.
ค่ะอาจารย์มาจี้ก็ให้ตัวอย่างนะคะที่เป็นstrong words ที่เป็น adjectives กับ adverb มาแล้วนะคะทีนี้อยากให้อาจารย์ลองช่วยกันคิด verbs ค่ะ strong verbs นะคะอาจารย์อาจจะไปแอบดูในเรื่องที่อ่านมาเมื่อกี้ก็ได้นะคะอันนี้แอบบอก Some strong verbs, and I'm again you can holler in from anywhere else if you have something in mind. Survive. Yeah, that's a strong one. Another one. Overcome. Yeah, something else. Suffer. Yes.
Mourn.
I'm sorry?
Mourn.
Evacuate. Oh, and there's another word. What's your other word?
To mourn.
Sorry, I heard somebody else.
Sing my again, please.
Mourn.
Mourn. Yeah. Yeah. Very strong words. All right, great. We also came up with over here, inspire. And we also came up with devastate. So we can see that persuasive writing is also an exercise in vocabulary development, because you're asking your students to think of more words. This is where a thesaurus is very helpful, where you can look up the simple word like any word that you might have. Mourn, it might be equivalent then to grieve. You help your students expand their vocabulary and use new words by encouraging them to try to use more compelling words, stronger words, in order to make their argument have some strength. Okay, we're going to look at planning now. And for part of this, we're switching to another PowerPoint for a few minutes. This is about how you can plan your sessions. The PowerPoint we're going to look at for a little while is one that I found on the internet, and I am using it. I did not create it. We're only going to look at a few of the slides on this PowerPoint. The reason I selected it is because it provides a very good, simple way, perhaps, of planning for writing a persuasive personal opinion. We're actually going to look at two ways. One is on this PowerPoint, and the other is in your packet. So for planning purposes, one of the important things that to help your students do is to decide how to organize their thinking and then get that organization into a written form. I know the staff is working on putting the PowerPoint up. So maybe I'll ask you actually to look in your packets while we're waiting for the document that's called Essay Planner. It says Writing Workshop Essay Planner. And if you can find this one, this is the more complicated of the two things I'm going to show you today. The one that's on the PowerPoint is the simpler one, but we'll look at the more complicated one first. This is a tool that is used oftentimes in helping students become better writers. It's very specific. It asks you to come up with a strong lead sentence. So you have to decide what your opinion is. Let's say that one of the opinions here was, let's use the 3 R's as an example. In the 3 R's, your lead sentence would be, planning for flooding requires 3 R's. That's your lead sentence. And your thesis would be the thing that you feel is most important about that. You might say something about the importance of preparedness. And then it gives you 3, they're called proofs. So these would be 3 elements that must be followed. So you're talking about ready to go, and relaxed. They just so happen to have 3. So this group must have seen my essay planner and already decided. And then it helps you walk through sentence by sentence what you need to say. It's actually a very interesting activity. This was actually created for students who are between the ages of 11 and 13. So quite young students were making an essay using this process. You could do it with younger students, but certainly with high school students. So when you get around to asking your students to write a persuasive essay, you might use this as a tool. Is the PowerPoint ready now? Okay, go ahead and put it up. You see it's a canned lesson. And we're not going to look at all of it, as I said. Okay. In any kind of persuasive writing, you're going to have a prompt. This is the topic of preparing for flooding, or how to survive with your family, or food and water shortages. Could have been any of the topics we came up with. For this one, it's the idea of the voting age in the United States. A lot of people who are eligible to vote don't register. This is the prompt. Now you have a direction. Write an essay saying what you think. should 18-year-olds be asked to vote or not? So when you take this assignment to your students, I'm not suggesting that you're going to use this topic. I think using a topic from flooding makes a lot of sense because it's something very current in everybody's thinking. And I think all of your students will have had some experience, either directly or somebody they know. We're just going to, okay. This is the idea of how you then are going to decide you're going to take a stand. And again, earlier, taking a stand means having an opinion. And earlier we talked about having examples. Or in the essay planner, it says proofs. What are 3 reasons why my opinion is right? What are 3 examples why my opinion is right? So you're going to be using this model. This is the idea of making a graphic organizer, which is to take a piece of paper and to fold it into 4 squares. So just fold it over and fold it over again. Now your students have before them a paper. Yeah, I can do that. Your students will have a paper that looks like this. It has four aspects to it already. This is called a graphic organizer. We talked about this previously. And you're going to make a box in the center. And that's where your thesis goes. This is your opinion. This is the opinion of the student goes in the beginning. And then the 4 quadrants become, here's one example, here's a second example, here's a third example, and here's the conclusion. So you make it very easy for your students to think about, this is how many they need. They have to fill each box. And so, again, you could use this kind of organizer or the essay planner. You can see now that one is very simple and one is more detailed. But I would encourage you to experiment with both of them with your students to see which one is going to work better for them. And if we just skip way forward in this one, sorry, there's lots of stuff here. Oopsie. Here you see you have examples and a summary. You add details. This is very similar to the essay planner. Sorry, I'm racing through this because I don't feel we need to look at all these details. I just want to get to the end. And now it becomes a paper. And each one of those sections becomes a part of the student's paper. Each box becomes one of the paragraphs, and you'll see that they're using different transitions. And finally, you summarize and you say something strong at the end. And finally, back to our vocabulary. This is where you're going to review your paragraphs and add stronger words, more adjectives, stronger adjectives, more adverbs, stronger adverbs. They come at the end of the editing process. Alrighty? So basically, what you've just seen me race through is how you might use this and gradually develop paragraphs out of it. And this, of course, will depend on the level of your students and what they're able to do. Okay, if you would not mind patching me back to the other PowerPoint, please. All right, this is something that those of you, we're looking now at another kind of persuasive writing. And this is something that those of you who've been in other of our sessions have encountered before. I believe it was Shay who did it with you, and it's from this series called This I Believe, which was originally a radio broadcast and then became a book also available online. And this was produced by National Public Radio, which is our, it's a radio source in the United States that is not government subsidized. It is actually to a small extent, come to think of it, but mostly it relies on donations from individuals. This, I believe, is a different kind of personal statement. And it's one, I was just talking with Ajahn Naraporn earlier, we might decide to do a small project on this as an outcome of this series. I'll leave this book if you want to have a glance at it. We can even pass it around here in Bangkok. The idea is short essays written by individuals in which they express their own personal belief about something. These are usually not political beliefs and usually not religious beliefs. They're usually more like a personal philosophy or something that has happened in life, and the individual writes about why this thing is important to them and why it's important for them. It's another form of writing that can allow your students to unlock what you might call their inner voice. If writing to the Bangkok Post unlocks your voice, it's unlocking your public voice. Your voice where you're saying to everybody what your belief is. This might be something more like a personal process or a personal belief. And it might be something you want to do with your students. So again, we're going to read one, and we're going to then talk about why it was powerful. And then to conclude, we might think about how you could bring this into your classroom. So what you're going to read now is the article called In Giving, I Connect to Others. It's in your packet, and we'll put one on the screen. This was written by Isabel Allende, who's an author. She's a writer. And everybody, I believe, should have a copy of this, or you'll be able to see it on the screen. I would suggest that it's really one page and just 2 lines on the back. So it's mostly just one page. If you would please read it somewhat quickly, very quickly, because we're almost out of time. And then I'll just have you chat with the partner for a minute about what you saw in the article, and I'll just read a small section to you at that point. So just take 3 or 4 minutes to skim this, please, and see what you think.
Okay.
Okay, because time is so precious, and I do want to talk briefly about assessment. You at least have all the materials that you can take with you and start working on in the next 2 weeks. And when I see you in 2 weeks, we'll start by looking at assessment again. But let me just read just a little bit of this particular essay, and then we'll look at the assessment rubric. As you can see, this author is writing about something very important that happened to her, which is the death of her daughter when her daughter was 28 years old. And she starts by saying, I've lived with passion and in a hurry, trying to accomplish too many things. I never had time to think about my beliefs until my 28-year-old daughter, Paula, fell ill. And then later on, she talks about the experience of losing her daughter, and she concludes by saying, give, give, give. What is the point of having experience, knowledge, or talent if I don't give them away? So she derives from her experience, a terrible experience of losing her daughter, this positive message that what she must do is give. So what you might find with your students is out of the negative experience of the flooding, there might be some lesson they learned that is positive. So to contrast, in a personal opinion like this, I believe, it's really your own experience and your own lessons. In an opinion piece to the newspaper, you're trying to convince somebody of something. They're both persuasive writing, but they take a different angle. So you might be thinking about this with your students. Which angle do you think might be better for them? Or you might give them a choice. Okay? So let's just look quickly at the rubric. It's the persuasive personal statement writing rubric. And I do believe that this warrants a little bit of extra time. So I promise that next time we'll begin by looking back at this. Okay? But this gives you a way of assessing students' writing. You'll see across the top there are scores of 1 to 4, and along the side there are different areas of interest. Did they respond to the assignment? If you told them to write a letter to the editor of the Bangkok Post, did they do that? Or did they do something else? If you told them to write about a specific example from their own experience, did they do that, or did they do something else? So then there's different criteria by which you can judge the extent to which they did that. And on we go, clarity, persuasiveness. Who's the audience? That's an interesting question for persuasive writing. If I'm writing a letter to the editor of a newspaper, my audience is everybody who reads that paper. If I'm writing something about this, I believe, my audience might be my friend who sits next to me in the class, or might be the teacher, or might be my grandmother, because maybe she inspired me so much during the time of the flooding. So really thinking about who are you writing to and for. So I encourage you, as you're developing your writing task, to think about this rubric to help you grade students. You can see, because we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 general areas, times 4, a student who did a really good job could end up with 20 points for this. A student who did a very poor job might only have 5 points, and everywhere in between. So that's the whole point of a rubric. Maybe you can just run through that quickly and then I'll close up.
ขอกลับไปที่ This I Believe ก่อนนะคะเมื่อกี้อาจารย์มาที่ให้เราอ่านนะคะตัวอย่างซึ่งอันนี้เนี่ยจะต่างจากที่เวลาเราเขียนแสดงความคิดเห็นไปที่หนังสือพิมพ์นะคะ This I Believe นี่คือแสดงความคิดเห็นเกี่ยวกับตัวเองแล้วก็เล่าถึงประสบการณ์ของตัวเองความคิดเห็นเกี่ยวกับตัวเองนะคะสิ่งที่เกิดขึ้นกับตัวเองแม้ว่ามันจะเป็นเชิง persuasive คือให้ผู้อ่านได้คล้อยตามก็ตามนะคะซึ่งต่างจากเวลาเราเขียนแสดงความคิดเห็นไปถึงหนังสือพิมพ์หรือว่าไปที่อื่นนะคะซึ่งอันนั้นเราอาจจะวิพากษ์วิจารณ์นะคะชี้ให้เห็นถึงปัญหาถึงสาเหตุถึงอะไรก็ได้นะคะทีนี้มาถึงรูบริกนะคะการประเมินเนี่ยค่ะ ก็อาจารย์ให้ตัวอย่างมานะคะว่าจะมีหัวข้อที่จะให้การประเมินอะไรบ้างนะคะขอภาพด้วยนะคะขึ้น documentation ด้วยนะคะการประเมินนี่นะคะก็มีหลายหัวข้อนะคะที่เราจะประเมินความเรียนที่ผู้เรียนเนี่ยเขียนได้นะคะแล้วก็มีเลข1 2 3 4คือคะแนนนะคะซึ่งถ้ามี5หัวข้อนะคะแล้วก็ผู้ที่ได้คะแนนนี่ก็จะอยู่ภายใน20คะแนนซึ่งตรงนี้เนี่ยคิดว่าท่านอาจารย์นี่ก็คงจะคุ้นเคยกับรูบริกแล้วนะคะอาจารย์คงจะเคยใช้ซึ่งก็เป็นวิธีการประเมินงานเขียนนะคะได้อย่างดีวิธีหนึ่งนะคะเพราะว่าเราจะมีหลักเกณฑ์ในการที่จะประเมินนะคะในส่วนต่างๆที่นักเรียนเขียนว่าครบถ้วนไหมนะคะซึ่งอันนี้ก็เป็นตัวอย่างหนึ่งเท่านั้นอาจารย์ก็นำไปปรับใช้ได้ตามความเหมาะสมนะคะค่ะ Over to you, Marty.
Okay, thank you. Now, we're asking you to try these out, but I realize it's not the 8th of February because I got the dates all messed up. Ready? What's the date for the first session with Shay? Okay, so this is the 17th of February. That will be, so I'm going to see you for 2 more sessions. And then Ajahn Shay will come. And it's at that session, we'll remind you each time, it's at that session that some samples of persuasive writing are due. And we hope to have some examples from each of the sites. So you have quite a bit of time to look at this. We've looked at persuasive writing. I promise to begin next time by looking at the rubric. Next time is Friday, the 20th of January. I'm sure about that date. It's 2 weeks from today. And we'll be looking at spoken opinion. So probably written opinion is something that our students are asked to do not so often. Perhaps even less often are they asked to express their opinion in English. But that's what we're going to be looking at, is getting our students to be able to speak about things that are important to them, so that again we can hopefully unlock that aspect of our students' lives as well. So with that, without further ado, I wish you a happy day. Khap kun ka, sawadee ka. Thank you very much.
ค่ะก็จบสำหรับการอบรมนะคะในหัวข้อ Unlocking Learners' Voices นะคะในครั้งแรกจากทั้งหมด6ตอนด้วยกันนะคะซึ่งสำหรับในหัวข้อนี้เนี่ยนะคะเราเน้นทักษะการเขียนแล้วก็การพูดนะคะค่ะเพื่อที่ให้ผู้เรียนเนี่ยสามารถที่จะแสดงความคิดเห็นได้ผ่านทักษะการเขียนและผ่านทักษะการพูดสำหรับวันนี้เป็นทักษะการเขียนนะคะคราวหน้าก็เป็นทักษะการพูดนะคะค่ะจนกว่าจะพบกันค่ะสวัสดีค่ะ